0547 hours, January 24th, 1945, Houssen, France. The Alsace-Lorraine corridor. Temperature, 14 degrees Fahrenheit, -10 with wind chill. Snow depth, 18 inches. 1st Lieutenant Garland Connor, Company K, 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, crawled into a shallow foxhole 300 yards east of the American main line. Forward observer duty, the loneliest job in ground combat. His mission: watch for German movement, call artillery coordinates, stay alive long enough to be useful. The Army's statistics told the story. Forward observers in the European theater survived an average of 17 days in combat. Connor had lasted 11 months. Today was day 334. The forward observer position was 4 feet wide and 3 feet deep. Frozen earth. No overhead cover. Connor's equipment inventory: 1 SCR-536 handy-talkie radio, range 1 mile, battery life 15 hours. 1 EE-8 field telephone hardwired to the 10th Field, Artillery Battalion Fire Direction Center, 3,200 yards to the rear. 1 M1 Garand rifle, .30 caliber, 8-round on-block clip, 80 rounds total. 8 Mark II fragmentation grenades, lethal radius, 15 meters. 1 M1911 A1 pistol, .45 caliber, 21 rounds in 3 magazines. His assistant, Private First Class Raymond Hollis, 19 years old, 3 weeks in combat, lay in a separate hole 10 feet to his left. 2 men, 300 yards of frozen ground between them and safety. The procedure for calling artillery fire had been drilled into every forward observer since basic training. Step 1. Identify target. Step 2. Estimate grid coordinates using map and compass. Step 3. Transmit fire mission request to Fire Direction Center. Step 4. FDC calculates firing data: azimuth, elevation, powder charge. Step 5. Guns fire. Step 6. Observer watches impact, reports corrections. Left 50, add 100. Step 7. Repeat until rounds hit target. The entire sequence took 90 seconds to 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes, an enemy assault could cover 400 yards. The mathematics of artillery support was simple. Speed meant survival. Hesitation meant death. The German counteroffensive had begun 24 days earlier. January 1st, 1945. Operation Nordwind. Hitler's final gamble in the West. 17 divisions, 250,000 men. The objective: recapture Strasbourg, split the Allied lines, buy time for the Reich. The American 7th Army held a 90-mile front with 6 divisions. Not enough men, not enough artillery. The 3rd Infantry Division anchored the center near Colmar. S2 intelligence reported enemy buildup east of Houssen. Estimated strength: 1 reinforced battalion, 400 to 500 troops. The estimate was wrong. Across the frozen fields, hidden in the tree lines, the 136th Gebirgsjäger Regiment was massing. Mountain infantry. Veterans of the Eastern Front. Full strength 600 men, 12 MG-42 machine guns, rate of fire 1,200 rounds per minute, 6 81mm mortars, Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets. They had been briefed: break through at Houssen, roll up the American flank, open the road to Strasbourg. 0558 hours. First light. Gray dawn filtering through overcast sky. Visibility 600 yards and improving. Connor scanned the tree line through field glasses. Nothing moved. The silence was absolute. Too quiet. Experienced soldiers learned to read silence. This silence had weight, pressure, the feeling of 600 men holding their breath. Connor checked the telephone connection. Open line to the FDC. Lieutenant Harold McKay, Fire Direction Officer, was on the other end. They had worked together for 4 months. McKay knew Connor's voice, knew his methods, knew that when Connor called fire, there was a reason. At 0601, Connor keyed the handset. Baker 6, this is King Oscar 1. Stand by for fire mission. I have movement. 0603 hours. Connor heard them first, the crunch of frozen snow under boots. Hundreds of boots, then the metallic rattle of equipment, rifle slings, ammunition boxes, mortar base plates. The sounds built like a wave, and then he saw them. White shapes emerging from the tree line 400 yards east. Not a patrol, not a company. An entire regiment rising from the forest in assault formation. Platoon columns feeding into company fronts. A wave 200 yards wide, moving across the open ground. Connor counted. 50, 100, 150. He stopped counting at 200. There were more behind, many more. He pressed the telephone to his ear. His voice did not waver. Fire mission, enemy infantry, in the open. Grid reference 472318. Direction 0850. Battalion strength. Will adjust. At the Fire Direction Center, Lieutenant McKay received the transmission. Battalion strength. 400 to 600 enemy soldiers in the open. He understood immediately. This was not a probe. This was a full-scale assault aimed at breaking the line. McKay had 4 batteries available, 16 M2A 105mm howitzers. Range to target, 3,200 yards. Time of flight, 18 seconds. Each shell weighed 33 pounds and contained 4.8 pounds of Composition B explosive. Lethal radius, 30 meters. Casualty radius, 50 meters. He also had access to Battery D, 155mm heavies, 95-pound shells. Lethal radius, 50 meters. He ordered all batteries to stand ready. When Connor called fire for effect, McKay would give him everything. 0605 hours. The first salvo left the tubes. 4 rounds, high explosive. Connor heard the distant thunder 3,200 yards behind him. Then the whistle of incoming steel, then 4 eruptions 100 yards beyond the German formation. Long, snow and frozen earth fountained skyward. The German advance did not stop. The officers screamed commands. The assault wave accelerated. Standard doctrine. When caught in the open under artillery, the only survival is forward. Connor adjusted. Drop 100. Left 25. Fire for effect. The mathematics were simple. At 350 yards, the Germans would reach him in 4 minutes. He needed to break their formation in 3. 0607 hours. The correction landed center mass. The entire German first wave disappeared into fire and steel. Bodies flew. The snow turned red in spreading circles. 16 guns firing continuously, 4 rounds per minute per gun, 64 shells per minute, hitting a 200-yard front. But the Germans kept coming. The 136th Gebirgsjäger had trained for this. Mountain troops understood casualties. They understood that hesitation in the open meant annihilation. Push through the barrage. Close with the enemy. Eliminate the observer calling the fire. Their MG-42s opened up, 1,200 rounds per minute per gun. Tracers streaked toward the American lines. Then, the mortars joined. 81mm rounds began walking toward Connor's position. One landed 20 feet away, then 15, then 10. Fragments tore through the frozen air and found his right hip. He grunted, did not scream, kept talking into the telephone. 0612 hours. Distance to lead German elements, 250 yards. Connor's ammunition, 64 rounds remaining. He had fired 16 rounds at shadows moving in the smoke. Private Hollis was shooting steadily from his position. Then an MG-42 burst, found the young private. 8 rounds in 2/3 of a second. Hollis did not make a sound. His rifle clattered against the frozen ground. Connor was alone. The hip wound was bleeding freely. He could feel warmth spreading down his leg, then freezing as blood met sub-zero air. The telephone wire was still intact. The line to McKay was still open. That was all that mattered. Right 50. Drop 50. Fire for effect. 0618 hours. Distance, 200 yards. Connor's rifle, 48 rounds. German casualties covered the field behind the assault wave, but 400 men were still moving, still coming. The MG-42s had found Company K's main line. American soldiers were dying 300 yards behind Connor. He could hear the screams over the gunfire. The German mortar crews adjusted, walking their rounds closer. A shell landed 8 feet from his foxhole. Concussion slammed his head against frozen earth. His vision blurred. He tasted blood. The telephone handset was still in his grip. Add 25, right 25, continuous fire.
0625 hours. Distance, 150 yards. Connor's rifle, 32 rounds. His pistol, untouched, 21 rounds. The German assault had lost momentum but not direction. The survivors used shell craters for cover, working forward in short rushes. Fire and move. Fire and move. Classic infantry tactics. An MG-42 team set up 60 yards to Connor's left and opened fire on Company K's flank. He watched an American soldier stand to throw a grenade and get cut in half by the burst. The line was failing. Without that machine gun silenced, Company K would collapse. Connor called the adjustment. The artillery responded. The MG-42 team ceased to exist, but the shells landed 70 yards from Connor's position. The fragments screamed past his head. He did not flinch. He called the next adjustment. 0632 hours. Distance, 100 yards. Connor's rifle, 16 rounds. The German officers were reorganizing. He could see a Hauptmann, a captain, pointing, directing squads to move left, to flank his position. They understood, killed the observer, and the artillery goes blind. Connor shot the captain through the chest with his Garand. The body dropped. Another officer took his place. Connor shot him too. 14 rounds. The assault hesitated, then resumed. A Feldwebel, a sergeant, screamed orders. The Germans rose from their craters and charged. 0638 hours. Distance, 75 yards. Close enough to see faces. Young men. Some looked terrified. Some looked determined. All of them were trying to kill him. Connor's rifle, 8 rounds, 1 clip. He fired carefully. 4 Germans dropped. 4 rounds remaining. Behind the assault wave, more troops emerged from the smoke. Reinforcements. Fresh soldiers pushing through the carnage. The 136th was feeding bodies into the grinder, accepting losses, pressing the attack. 300 yards behind Connor, Company K's ammunition was running low. The machine guns were overheating. The line was bending. If it broke, 200 American soldiers would die. Connor looked at his Garand, 4 rounds. At his pistol, 21 rounds. At the field telephone, still connected. McKay was still there, waiting. The Army Field Manual FM 640 governed artillery fire support. Chapter 7 covered danger close missions. Artillery delivered within 600 meters of friendly troops. The manual specified minimum safe distances. For 105mm shells, 200 meters. For 155mm shells, 250 meters. Below those distances, the probability of friendly casualties exceeded acceptable thresholds. The manual did not address calling fire on your own position. That scenario was not in the book. It was not in any book, because no one who wrote field manuals believed a man would willingly call death onto his own coordinates. They had never met Garland Connor. Connor picked up the telephone. He spoke 3 sentences that Lieutenant McKay would remember for the rest of his life. Baker 6, this is King Oscar 1. Final protective fire. Concentration Baker 7. My position. Everything you have. Now. The radio crackled. McKay's voice came back, strained. King Oscar 1, confirm. You are calling fire on your own grid coordinates? Connor watched the Germans, 60 yards now. He could see the Feldwebel's mustache, the sweat frozen on a young soldier's face, the muzzle flash of a rifle aimed at his head. He spoke his last transmission. That is correct. Fire now, or lose the company. At the Fire Direction Center, McKay hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds of understanding what he was about to do. Then he gave the order. All batteries. Concentration Baker 7. HE quick. Continuous fire. Battery A opened up. Then B. Then C. Then D. 16 105mm howitzers. 4 155mm howitzers. 20 guns firing as fast as crews could load. The shells rose in converging arcs. 33-pound projectiles. 95-pound projectiles. All falling toward the same 100-meter square of frozen French farmland. The square where First Lieutenant Garland Connor lay bleeding in a 3-foot hole, watching 600 Germans close to killing distance. 0641 hours. The first rounds impacted 40 yards from Connor's foxhole. The world became fire. Sound ceased to exist, replaced by a physical pressure that crushed the chest and emptied the lungs. Shrapnel screamed in all directions. Frozen earth became shrapnel. Bodies became shrapnel. The German assault wave disintegrated. Men who had been running toward Connor simply ceased to exist. The barrage walked across the attack frontage. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like a scythe through wheat. Connor pressed his face into the frozen ground and prayed to a god he had doubted since Anzio. Fragments struck the dirt around his head. One sliced his ear. Another embedded in his shoulder. He did not move. Could not move. The barrage continued. 4 minutes. 200 rounds. 6,600 pounds of high explosive. The mathematics of annihilation reduced to simple numbers. When the guns fell silent at 0645, the smoke drifted across a landscape that no longer resembled a battlefield. It resembled the moon. Craters overlapped craters, fragments of equipment, rifles, helmets, mortar tubes, lay scattered like children's toys. And bodies, parts of bodies. The frozen read testimony to what American artillery could do when unleashed without restriction. Connor raised his head. The ringing in his ears was absolute. He saw movement in the smoke. German survivors. Perhaps 50 men from the original 600. They were not advancing. They were retreating, running back toward the tree line, stumbling over their dead. The assault was broken. Connor tried to stand. His right leg collapsed. The hip wound had stiffened in the cold, the blood frozen to his uniform, the muscles refusing commands. He fell back into the foxhole. The telephone was still in his hand. He keyed the handset. Baker 6. King Oscar 1. Cease fire. Target destroyed. Estimate 50 killed, 100 wounded. Assault repulsed. He paused. Blood ran down his face from the ear wound. I could use some medics up here. McKay's voice came back, thick with emotion. Medics are on the way, King Oscar. You crazy son of a bitch. Medics reached Connor at 0720, 35 minutes after the barrage ended. They found him conscious, coherent, and still gripping the telephone. The hip wound had clotted in the cold. The ear was superficial. The shoulder fragment had missed the bone. The flight surgeon at the battalion aid station counted the wounds and calculated the odds. The fragment in his hip had stopped 2 inches from the femoral artery. 1 inch deeper, and he would have bled out in 4 minutes. The barrage had landed an average of 47 yards from his position. The minimum safe distance was 200 yards. He had absorbed 200 rounds at 1/4 the safe distance, and lived. The surgeon wrote one word in Connor's medical file: miraculous. The after-action report reached 7th Army headquarters within 48 hours. The numbers were verified by Graves registration and prisoner interrogation. German dead, 54, recovered from the field east of Houssen. German wounded, estimated 100 to 150, based on blood trails and prisoner statements. German prisoners, 12, captured during the retreat. Total enemy casualties, approximately 200 from an attacking force of 600. 33% losses in 42 minutes. American casualties in Company K: 14 killed, 23 wounded. Without Connor's intervention, the estimate was total loss of the company: 200 men. The mathematics of sacrifice reduced to a single equation: one forward observer trading his life for 200. The Distinguished Service Cross recommendation was written by Colonel John Gruber, commanding the 7th Infantry Regiment, on January 26th. 2 days after the action, the citation described Connor's actions in official language: extraordinary heroism in combat, complete disregard for personal safety, calling artillery fire upon his own position. The language was precise, clinical. It did not capture the moment, the frozen ground, the blood running into his boot, the German 60 yards away, the telephone in his hand, and the words, "Fire now or lose the company." Some decisions cannot be reduced to official language. Word of Connor's action spread through the artillery community within weeks. Fire direction officers passed the story through official channels and unofficial conversations. The technique, calling fire on your own position as a last resort, was discussed, debated, analyzed. Some called it suicide, others called it tactical genius. The Army Field Artillery School at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, eventually incorporated the concept into advanced training. Final protective fire, observer's position. The manual writers had to acknowledge what Garland Connor had proven. Sometimes the only way to save the line is to put yourself on the wrong side of the artillery. Word of Connor's action spread through the artillery community within weeks. Fire direction officers passed the story through official channels and unofficial conversations. The technique, calling fire on your own position as a last resort, was discussed, debated, analyzed. Some called it suicide. Others called it tactical genius. The Army Field Artillery School at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, eventually incorporated the concept into advanced training. Final protective fire, observer's position. The manual writers had to acknowledge what Garland Connor had proven. Sometimes the only way to save the line is to put yourself on the wrong side of the artillery. Anyone would have done it. The statement was factually incorrect. The Army had studied the question. In situations where forward observers faced overrun, the standard response was withdrawal. Fall back to friendly lines. Preserve the observer for future missions. The tactical logic was sound. A trained FO was more valuable than a single engagement. Calling fire on your own position was not taught, not recommended, not expected. What Connor did was not what anyone would have done. It was what one man chose to do when the mathematics of retreat meant 200 Americans dying. He made a different calculation. The Distinguished Service Cross remained Garland Connor's highest decoration for 73 years. He never complained. He never lobbied for recognition. He worked his farm, raised his family, and kept his memories private. Then, in 2018, Congress authorized a review of Valor Awards that may have been improperly adjudicated. The review board examined Connor's case. The file was extensive: artillery logs, survivor interviews, medical records, German prisoner statements. The board's conclusion was unanimous. The action at Houssen met every criterion for the Medal of Honor: conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of a life above and beyond the call of duty. June 26, 2018. The White House. President Donald Trump presented the Medal of Honor for actions taken 73 years earlier. Garland Connor was not there to receive it. He had died on March 1, 1998, in Clinton County, Kentucky. 20 years before the recognition came. His widow, Pauline Connor, stood in his place, 93 years old. She had waited 73 years to see her husband receive what he deserved. The citation was read aloud. The words described a frozen field in Alsace, a wounded man with a telephone, a decision that saved 200 lives. Pauline Connor accepted the medal with steady hands. She did not cry. Garland would not have wanted tears. 0645 hours. January 24th, 1945. The artillery has stopped. Smoke drifts across the snow. First Lieutenant Garland Merle Connor lies in a frozen foxhole, bleeding from 3 wounds. ears ringing, heart pounding. Around him, 54 German soldiers will never rise again. 300 yards behind him, 200 American soldiers are alive because one man made a decision. He did not know he would survive. He expected to die. He made the call anyway, because the line had to hold, because Company K had to live, because some decisions are not about survival. They are about what survival means. Garland Connor understood this. In the frozen ground outside Houssen, France, with 600 Germans closing on his position, he understood exactly what his life was worth. And he bet it all on 3 words: fire on me.